The smell of burnt oil permeated Rob Miller's blue coveralls as he bent under the hood of the grey Corolla. 50 years old, 30 of them spent wielding wrenches and dealing with temperamental engines at St. George's Auto Shop in the east side of Los Angeles. His calloused hands worked with automatic precision, replacing the timing belt while his mind drifted far away to room 304 at St. Jude's Hospital. Anna Claire, 12 years old, brown hair that now fell in thin strands across the white pillow. 2 months hospitalized, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the doctors had said with that professional voice that tried to hide the severity. The conventional treatment was working, but there was another path. Imported medications, modern therapies that could increase the chances of a cure by 30%. $80,000. A fortune Rob didn't possess, couldn't raise in time, and didn't know where to get. The screeching sound of a horn yanked him from his thoughts. A metallic red Camaro roared unnecessarily loud into the shop, taking up 2 parking spots. Rob recognized the car immediately and felt his stomach clench. Mark Taylor. The new client that Mr. Jenkins, the shop owner, had asked him to treat with extreme care. Rich, spoiled, and with the terrible habit of treating mechanics as if they were his personal servants. Mark stepped out of the car wearing imported sunglasses and a polo shirt that probably cost Rob's monthly salary. Tall, gelled hair, the smile of someone who had never needed to ask for anything politely in his life. "Hey, you!" he called out, snapping his fingers as if summoning a waiter. "Come here. I need you to fix a problem with my car. Today." Rob wiped his hands on a dirty rag and walked over to him, swallowing the pride that tried to rise in his throat. "Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. What seems to be the issue?" Mark took off his sunglasses and looked Rob up and down with disdain. "The car is making a weird noise when I accelerate above 75. Must be something you guys messed up during the last service." Rob knew that wasn't true. He had done the service himself the week before, and the car was impeccable. But he couldn't argue. He needed this job. He needed every cent of his paycheck. "I'll take a look, sir. You can leave the car here and I'll check everything out." Mark tossed the keys toward Rob, who had to quickly stretch his arm to catch them mid-air. "I want it ready by 5. I have an important engagement." Rob nodded silently and watched Mark walk away, talking loudly on his cell phone about a dinner that would cost more than Rob earned in a month. Mr. Jenkins appeared from the back of the shop, a 60-year-old man with a grey mustache and tired eyes. "Rob, I know it's tough," the old man said quietly, placing a hand on the mechanic's shoulder. "But we need this client. He brings his friends' cars here. It's good for business." Rob just nodded. Mr. Jenkins didn't know about Anna Claire, about the hospital bill that grew every day, about the desperation that woke him up every night at 3 in the morning. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of mechanical work. Tony and Joe, the other mechanics in the shop, worked on their own cars, exchanging sympathetic glances when Mark returned at 4:30 to pick up the Camaro. "So is it ready?" "Yes, sir. The problem was just a loose exhaust clamp. It's fixed." "Now." Mark grabbed the keys without thanking him and got into the car. He started the engine, revved it hard inside the closed shop, filling everything with smoke, and drove out with a slight skid. Rob coughed, wiping his stinging eyes. "That guy's a jerk," muttered Tony, a 30-year-old guy with tattoos on his arms. "I don't know how you put up with him, Rob." "We put up with what we have to put up with," Rob replied, returning to the Corolla that was still waiting for the new belt. At 6 in the evening, when the shop closed, Rob didn't go straight home. He took the bus that led him to St. Jude's Hospital, a 40-minute trip he made every day. Anna Claire was awake when he entered the room, her thin face illuminated by the light of her cell phone. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, my love. How are you today?" "Better. The nurse said my tests look good." Rob sat in the chair next to the bed and held his daughter's thin hand. She was everything he had in the world. After Sandra left him 15 years ago, taking only her suitcases and the car, he raised Anna Claire, alone. He worked 2 jobs when she was little, never missed a school meeting, and learned how to braid her hair by watching YouTube videos. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever been really scared of something, like a fear that just paralyzes you?" Rob felt his chest tighten. He knew exactly what she was talking about, even without knowing that she knew. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I get scared sometimes, scared the treatment won't work. But the therapist said it's normal to be scared, and that we just have to face it anyway." He squeezed her hand tighter. "Your therapist is very wise, and yes, I've been very scared. I still am of some things. But you, my daughter, are the bravest person I know." Anna Claire smiled, and in that smile, Rob saw the entire reason he woke up every day. "Dad, I found something." She picked up her cell phone and showed him the screen. It was a digital poster, slightly pixelated, announcing an amateur car race at the Interlagos Speedway. A $20,000 prize for first place. Registration open until Friday. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, watching her father's face. "I know you used to race, Grandma told me." Rob felt his blood run cold. He hadn't talked about that in 15 years, not since the accident, not since he lost everything. "Anna Claire, I don't race anymore. That was a long time ago." "But you're good, Dad. Grandma said you won all the races." That was another life. Silence settled between them, heavy as concrete. Anna Claire knew that silence. It was the same silence that fell whenever someone mentioned her father's past, the years before she was born, the career he never quite explained why. It ended. "Dad," she finally said, her voice small but firm, "I know you're scared of something. I see it in your eyes when we drive past a racetrack, but $20,000 would help a lot, wouldn't it?" Rob couldn't answer. His throat was too tight. He kissed his daughter's forehead and mumbled that he needed to go, that he would be back tomorrow, and that she needed to rest. On the bus ride home, he couldn't get that poster out of his head. $20,000. It wasn't enough for the full treatment, but it was a start. It was hope in the form of numbers. When he arrived at his small apartment in the city, he went straight to the building's garage. There, covered by a dusty blue tarp, was his only valuable possession, a 1987 Chevy Nova, white with red accents, inherited from his father 5 years ago. The car was a relic, kept running more by stubbornness and mechanical skill than by any other reason. Rob slowly pulled off the tarp, like someone uncovering a hidden treasure. He ran his hand over the dusty hood, feeling the memories return in waves. He had rebuilt that engine with his own hands, piece by piece, in a maintenance ritual that was more therapy than necessity. He opened the hood and looked at the engine. Simple, old, but solid. He knew every bolt, every gasket, every millimeter of that engine. Was he still capable? Could he drive again after so long? After the accident that left him in the hospital for 8 months, that ended his career, that destroyed his marriage, that turned him into a shadow of the driver he once was? He closed the hood with a sigh and covered the car again. No, it was crazy. He had moved past that life. Now he was just Rob the mechanic, Anna Claire's father, a simple man who fixed other people's cars, not one who raced them. But that night, lying in the dark bed, he couldn't sleep. He saw his daughter's face, her brave smile despite everything. He saw the numbers for the treatment that could save her. He saw the Nova waiting in the garage, like an old racehorse that still remembered how to gallop. At 3 in the morning, he picked up his cell phone and opened the race website. His fingers hesitated over the registration button. 15 years. 15 years since he sat behind the wheel of a car on a track. 15 years since his world caught fire on that cursed curve. But $20,000 and 30% more chance of a cure. Rob took a deep breath and pressed the button. Registered. There was no turning back now. The next morning, he woke up to a message confirming his registration and feeling a mix of terror and determination he hadn't experienced in a long time. He went to the shop earlier than usual, before Mr. Jenkins and the others arrived. He needed time. Time to think, time to prepare, time to find out if he was still capable. But when he arrived, he found something unexpected. Mark Taylor's red Camaro was already parked in front of the shop, blocking the entrance, and next to it, still covered by the blue tarp but clearly transported by a tow truck overnight, was his Nova. Rob stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, staring fixedly at the scene in front of him. His heart pounded. How had the Nova gotten here? He had left it in the building's garage the night before, covered by the tarp. Now it was in front of the shop, still with the same blue tarp, but clearly transported by someone. "Good morning, mechanic." Mark Taylor's voice came from inside the still-closed shop. Rob turned and saw the millionaire sitting on the hood of his own Camaro, fiddling with his cell phone with a smug smile on his face. "How did you get in here? And what is this?" Rob asked, pointing to the Nova. Mark stood up and walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps, like a predator who knows his prey has nowhere to run. "Let's just say I have access to a lot of things, including the database of Sunday's race registrations." Rob's blood froze. "You had no right to do that." Mark gave a short, cruel laugh. "Right. Mechanic, I do what I want, and when I saw your name on the entry list, I got curious. Robert Miller. I thought to myself, what's the chance it's the same Robert Miller who was a stock car champion 12 years in a row 15 years ago?" Rob clenched his fists at his sides. His past was not something he shared. It was a wound that had never properly healed, a life that had been left behind on that curve where everything ended. "That's none of your business." "Oh, but it is," Mark said, walking around the covered Nova. "Because then I did my research. Robert Rob Miller, 12-year career, multiple victories, one of the most promising drivers in the category, until he had a nasty accident and disappeared off the map, and now you're here, fixing my car, earning peanuts a month." Mark abruptly pulled off the tarp, revealing the old but well-maintained Nova. He let out a loud, exaggerated laugh that echoed down the still empty morning street. Wait, he said between laughs. "You're going to race with this old man's car against prepared cars? Are you serious?" Rob felt the anger rise in his throat like bile. "I need the prize money. It's none of your business what for." Mark stopped laughing, but the malicious smile remained on his face. "Ah, so that's why. Let me guess. Financial problems? Debts? Or is it for your sick daughter?" "How do you know about my daughter?" Rob took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "I know everything, mechanic. I researched you last night. Hannah Claire, 12 years old, hospitalized at St. Jude's, leukemia. What a sad situation, truly, but $20,000 won't solve your problem, will it?" Rob was trembling now, not from fear, but from a rage he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to lunge at the man, make him swallow every disrespectful word, but he couldn't. He couldn't risk losing his job. He couldn't risk being arrested. Anna Claire needed him. "Get out of here," he said, his voice sharp as glass. "Now!" Mark raised his hands in false surrender. Calm down. I came here to make a proposition, a business proposition, let's say. I don't want anything from you." Mark ignored him and continued. "You're going to race this coffin on wheels against real cars. It's going to be humiliating. It's going to be pathetic. But you know what would be fun? Racing against you." Rob looked at the red Camaro, the imported V8 engine, the prepared car that cost more than he would earn in 10 years. "Your car is 10 times more powerful than mine." "Exactly," Mark said, his smile widening. "That's why I want to make a bet. If by some miracle your Nova beats my Camaro in this race, I'll pay you $100,000. Enough money for your daughter's treatment and then some." Rob felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. $100,000. It was more than he needed. It was complete salvation. "And if I lose?" "If you lose," Mark shrugged, "you owe me nothing. You'll already be humiliated enough for losing with that ridiculous car. That will be payment enough for me." It was a trap. Rob knew it was. But what kind of trap? If he lost nothing but the pride that was already in tatters. If he won, impossible as it seemed, he would have everything he needed. "Why are you doing this?" Mark leaned in close, so close that Rob could smell the expensive cologne. "Because I can. Because it's fun. And because I want to see you publicly crushed, driver. To see the great Robert Miller lose badly. In front of everyone. In the place where you used to shine. It will be my form of entertainment on Sunday." Just then, Mr. Jenkins arrived to open the shop, followed shortly by Tony and Joe. The three stopped, surprised to see the scene. The uncovered Nova, Rob and Mark face to face. "What's going on here?" Mr. Jenkins asked, looking from one to the other. Mark turned to the newcomers with a theatrical smile. Perfect, we have witnesses. Mr. Jenkins, gentlemen mechanics, you are witnessing a bet. Next Sunday at the racetrack, your employee and I will participate in a race. If he beats me, I pay him $100,000. If I win, he owes me nothing. You are my witnesses. Tony and Joe exchanged confused glances. Mr. Jenkins frowned. Rob, what is this? You're going to race? Rob didn't take his eyes off Mark. He knew he should refuse. He knew it was madness. But he thought of Anna Claire in the hospital, her words about facing fear, the $80,000 she needed. I accept the bet, he said, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside him. Mark extended his hand with a victorious smile. Rob shook it, feeling the soft hand of someone who had never worked a day in his life. Excellent. See you Sunday then, champ. Oh, and you can keep your little car here. I had it brought over as a gift, so you have time to try and make it less embarrassing. Mark got into the Camaro, started the engine, which roared loudly, and sped off, leaving a cloud of burnt tire smoke. Mr. Jenkins approached Rob, worry etched on his wrinkled face. Rob, are you crazy? His car must have 300 horsepower. The Nova has what? 80. 75, Rob corrected quietly. Joe tapped the side of the Nova, hearing the hollow sound of the metal. This car is good, Rob. Well maintained, but against that Camaro it's impossible. Tony crossed his arms, thoughtful. Wait a minute. Mr. Jenkins, was Rob really a stock car driver? Is that true? Mr. Jenkins nodded slowly. He was. One of the best. I followed the races back then. He was incredible. Aggressive but clean. Fast but smart. It was a shame what happened. Rob lowered his gaze. He didn't like to remember. That was a long time ago, he said. Another life. But you still remember how to drive, don't you? Tony insisted, a spark of excitement in his eyes. We can help you prep the car. We have 3 days until Sunday. Rob looked at the Nova, then at his colleagues, and finally at Mr. Jenkins. I'll need to use the shop at night, after hours, can I? Mr. Jenkins hesitated for a moment, then put his hand on Rob's shoulder. Use whatever you need. Parts, tools, everything. You're a good man, Rob. You deserve something good to happen. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Rob worked on clients' cars as usual, but his mind was on the Nova, mentally tracing every modification he would need to make. He couldn't compete with the Camaro in terms of power. It was impossible. But maybe, just maybe, he could compensate in other areas: weight, handling, suspension setup, and driving. God, he hoped he still knew how to drive. When the shop closed at 6, Rob didn't go to the hospital. He called Anna Claire, made up an excuse about extra work, heard the disguised disappointment in her voice, and felt his heart ache. But he had 3 days. 3 days to turn that Nova into something competitive. Tony and Joe stayed to help. They pushed the Nova into the shop and started working. The first thing was to check everything: engine, suspension, brakes, transmission. Rob opened the hood and looked at the engine he had rebuilt years ago. It was clean, well maintained, but it needed adjustments. We're taking out everything non-essential, Rob said, already slipping into the race driver mode that had been dormant for so long. Back seat out, trunk empty, spare tire out. Every pound counts. He worked until midnight, his hands rememorizing every bolt, every connection. Joe worked on the suspension, lowering the car, making it firmer. Tony worked on the brakes, replacing the pads with high-performance ones they got from a friendly supplier. When Rob finally got home at 2 in the morning, he collapsed into bed, exhausted, but he couldn't sleep. He saw the curve. He always saw the curve. That specific curve where everything had ended 15 years ago. The car flipping, the impact, the hospital, the months of recovery, and the fear, the paralyzing fear that prevented him from accelerating, that turned his hands to stone every time he thought about driving for real. Could he overcome it? He had to overcome it. For Anna Claire, for both of them. On Thursday, Rob returned to work on the Nova as soon as the shop closed. He adjusted the carburetor, changed the spark plugs, and regulated the ignition timing. He managed to squeeze out a few more horsepower, but it was still ridiculously little compared to the Camaro. He would need to drive perfectly. 0 mistakes, every curve at the limit, every overtake calculated. On Friday morning, Mark returned to the shop. He arrived laughing, accompanied by 2 equally rich and arrogant friends. They went straight to where Rob was working on the Nova. "Look at this, guys," Mark said to his friends, pointing at the car. "The great champion is going to race with this against my Camaro." His friends laughed, took pictures, and made jokes. Rob tightened the wrench in his hand, trying to control himself. "What's your daughter's disease again?" Mark asked with false concern. "Leukemia, right? Too bad the prize money won't help much. 20 grand is nothing for a treatment like that. You'll pay me 100,000 when I win," Rob said without looking at him, continuing to work. Mark approached, crouching down to Rob's level. "Do you really think you're going to win? Look at you, an old mechanic, with an even older car, trying to relive a glory that's past. It's pathetic." Rob finally looked at him, his dark eyes meeting Mark's. "You'll find out on Sunday whether it's pathetic or not." Mark stood up, wiping his hands as if he had touched something dirty. "I can't wait. It's going to be the best show I've ever seen." They left laughing, and Rob returned to the car. His hands were shaking with anger. Tony approached. "How do you put up with that guy, Rob?" "Because I have to," Rob replied. "But after Sunday, I'll never have to put up with him or anyone else who treats me like that again." That night, Rob finally went to the hospital. Anna Claire was pale, thinner, but her eyes lit up when he entered. "Dad, are you okay? You look tired." "I'm fine, my love. Just working hard." She studied him for a moment, that look too knowing for a 12-year-old. "You signed up for the race, didn't you?" Rob couldn't lie to her. "I did." Anna Claire's face lit up with a smile that made everything worthwhile. "I knew it. You're going to race again. Dad, you can't imagine how much I wanted to see this." Rob held her hand, that hand so fragile now. "One day you'll see. Tiresi, when you get out of here, when you're cured, we'll go to a racetrack together." She smiled, squeezing his hand back. "Promise me you won't be scared? Promise me you'll race for real?" He swallowed hard, thinking of the curve, the accident, the trauma he carried. "I promise." Saturday dawned gray over Los Angeles, with heavy clouds that threatened rain, but never decided to fall. Rob arrived at the shop at 7 in the morning, an hour before normal hours, carrying a bag with coffee and donuts for Tony and Joe, who had promised to help him with the final preparations. The Nova was in the middle of the shop, hood open, exposing the engine they had worked on all week. It looked so small, so fragile compared to the modern engines of the competition cars. But it was honest. It was real. It was everything Rob had. Mr. Jenkins appeared half an hour later, carrying a box of special tools. "I brought this from my garage," the old man said, placing the box on the floor. "They're tools from my time as a race mechanic. I think they'll help you." Rob looked at his boss with gratitude. "You were a race mechanic?" "I was, a long time ago, back in the 80s when stock car was just starting. That's where I first saw you, Rob, at a race in Interlagos. You were incredible, aggressive but clean, fast but smart. It was a shame what happened." Rob lowered his gaze. He didn't like to remember. "Everyone has a fatal accident in life," Mr. Jenkins continued, "but not everyone gets a chance to come back. Tomorrow is your chance." Tony and Joe arrived shortly after, and the 4 men set to work. Rob adjusted the weight distribution, moving the battery to the trunk to improve balance. Joe worked on the shock absorbers, making the car stiffer for the curves. Tony installed an oil pressure gauge and a temperature gauge on the improvised dashboard. "You need to see these numbers during the race," Tony explained. "If the engine starts to overheat or lose oil pressure, you have to know instantly." At 10 in the morning, the work was interrupted by the familiar sound of the red Camaro arriving. Mark parked in front of the shop and got out with his cell phone in hand, filming everything. "Good morning, champ," he said sarcastically. "I came to see how the preparation of your rocket is going." Rob didn't answer, continuing to work. Mark approached, pointing his cell phone at the Nova. "Look at this, folks." He spoke to the camera as if making a social media video. Here we have former champion Robert Miller preparing his '87 Nova to compete against a 500 horsepower V8 Camaro. That's what I call courage or stupidity. Probably stupidity. Mr. Jenkins took a step forward, his patience running out. "Mr. Taylor, please, we're working here." Mark lowered his phone, but the malicious smile remained. Sure, I don't want to interrupt. I just came to let you know that I increased the bet with my friends. I bet $50,000 that I'll beat you by more than 2 laps. So don't disappoint me by giving up or crashing the car." Rob finally looked at him, wiping his grease-stained hands. "I won't give up." "Great, because public humiliation only works if you actually try. See you tomorrow, mechanic." They left laughing, and the atmosphere in the shop became heavy. Tony kicked an old tire in anger. "I wish so much you'd beat him, Rob, even if it's just to wipe that smile off his face." "I will win," Rob said, and for the first time there was certainty in his voice. They worked the rest of the morning without stopping. Rob meticulously tested every system of the car: brakes, clutch, transmission, steering. Everything had to be perfect because he would have no margin for error. In the afternoon, after Mr. Jenkins dismissed the employees early, Rob asked to do a test run. They pushed the Nova onto the empty street next to the shop. Rob got into the car, adjusted the seat and fastened the seatbelt. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. It had been 15 years since he had driven for real. Since before the accident, since before the fear. He started the engine. It purred softly, like an old but still capable cat. He stepped on the clutch, engaged first gear. He slowly released it, and the car began to move. The first few laps around the block were cautious. He tested the brakes at every corner, felt the steering response, and listened to the engine noises. The car was good, solid, reliable. But then, on an empty straight, he floored the accelerator. The engine groaned and the car picked up speed, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. And then it happened. The memory came back like a punch to the gut: the curve, the car spinning, the impact, the flames, the pain. It all rushed back at once, and Rob instinctively slammed on the brakes, stopping the car in the middle of the street. He was sweating cold, his heart pounding, his hands gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only solid thing in the world. He couldn't do this, he couldn't. The fear was too great, too old. It was too deeply rooted. He drove back to the shop slowly, parked the Nova, and got out without saying anything. Tony and Joe exchanged worried glances, but didn't ask. Rob went straight to the hospital. He needed to see Anna Claire. He needed to remember why he was doing this. She was sleeping when he arrived, so he just sat in the chair next to the bed and watched her. So small, so fragile, but at the same time, so strong, stronger than him. She faced the disease every day with a courage he could barely comprehend. Anna Claire slowly opened her eyes and smiled when she saw him. "Hi, Dad. Is the car ready?" "It is," he replied, trying to smile back. "You're scared." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I am," he admitted. "Very." She held out her thin hand, and he took it. "You know what the therapist told me yesterday? That courage isn't about not being scared. Courage is being scared and doing it anyway." Rob felt his eyes sting. When had his daughter become so wise? "You are much braver than I am, Anna Claire." "No, Dad, you're the bravest man I know. You raised me alone. You work every day to give me everything I need. You're doing this race for me. That's courage. But what if I can't do it? What if the fear is too big?" Anna Claire squeezed his hand tighter. "Then you stop, breathe, and keep going. That's what I do when I'm scared of the needles, the medicine, the doctors. I stop, breathe, and keep going. Because it's worth it. Because on the other side of fear, there's something good waiting." Rob kissed his daughter's forehead, leaving his lips there for a moment. "How did I get so lucky to have you?" "It was God," she said with a smile. "Or luck, whatever. The important thing is that you're going to win tomorrow. I know you are." He stayed for another hour at the hospital, talking to Anna Claire about simple, everyday things until she started to get sleepy again. When he returned home, it was already night, but he couldn't sleep. He stood at the apartment window, looking at the illuminated city, thinking about the next day's race. He thought about the entire path he had traveled, from the dreamy boy who wanted to be a driver, to the champion he was, to the broken man the accident left behind, to the mechanic he became, to the father he was now. He couldn't let fear win again. He had already let fear steal 15 years of his life. He wasn't going to let it steal his daughter's future, too. He picked up his cell phone and called Tony. "I need a favor." Half an hour later, he was back at the shop. Tony was there, along with Joe, whom he had also called. They opened the gate and Rob drove the Nova inside. "What do you need?" "Rob," Tony asked, "I need you guys to come with me. I need to do a real test, a race test." They drove to a deserted industrial road on the outskirts of the city, a place Rob knew from the old days. It was a long straight followed by a tight curve, perfect for testing the limits of the car and the driver. Rob positioned the Nova at the start of the straight. Tony and Joe stood outside watching. He took a deep breath, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and took off. First gear, second, third, the speed, increasing 40, 50, 60, 70, the engine screaming. The curve approached fast. The memory tried to return, the fear tried to paralyze him. But he thought of Anna Claire. He thought of her words, "Stop, breathe, keep going." He braked late on purpose, forcing himself to trust the brakes Tony had prepared. The car slowed down abruptly. He threw the steering wheel, feeling the car lean, the tires screaming on the asphalt. The rear end started to slide out. And then the instinct returned. That driver's instinct that had been dormant for 15 years. He corrected the steering at the exact angle, feathered the accelerator, and the Nova passed through the curve at the absolute limit, almost touching the curb. On the other side of the curve, Rob accelerated again, his heart pounding, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from life. He had done it. He had taken the curve at the limit. He had faced the fear and won. He did 3 more laps, each one faster than the last, until he knew every inch of that improvised track. When he finally stopped, Tony and Joe ran up to him. "Dude, that was incredible," Tony shouted. "You really are." "Good." Rob got out of the car smiling, feeling complete for the first time in a long time. The driver he was wasn't dead. He was just waiting for the right moment to return. They returned to the city well past midnight. Rob barely slept, but when he did, he didn't dream of the accident. He dreamed of victory. On Sunday morning, he woke up at 6. He showered, put on clean clothes, and went to get the Nova from the shop. Tony, Joe, and Mr. Jenkins were already there, waiting. "We're coming with you," Mr. Jenkins said. "If you're going to do this, you're not doing it alone." They formed a small caravan to the Interlagos Speedway. The place looked different, smaller in Rob's memory than in reality, but the curves were the same, the track was the same, and somewhere on that track was the curve that had changed his life forever. Today he was going to show that it no longer had power over him. Today he was going to drive again, for real, without fear, without limits, for Anna Claire, for himself, for the second chance life was giving him. The sun was rising over the Interlagos Speedway when Rob passed through the gates. The familiar smell of burnt rubber and fuel filled his nostrils, bringing back memories he had kept in a dark corner of his mind for 15 years. The place was different, modernized, but the essence was the same. The track where he had been champion, the track where he had lost everything. Mr. Jenkins drove the truck pulling the trailer with the Nova, while Tony and Joe followed close behind. They parked in the area reserved for participants, and Rob stepped out of the vehicle with shaky legs. "You okay?" Mr. Jenkins asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I am. Just nervous." "Nervous is good. It means you care." They unloaded the Nova, and Rob went to do the mandatory technical inspection. The official looked at the old car with skepticism, but after checking the safety items, he approved its participation. 3-point harness, fire extinguisher, race number painted on the doors, 47. Qualifying would start in an hour. Rob had time to do a few reconnaissance laps. He got into the Nova, adjusted the mirrors and slowly drove out of the pit area. The track stretched out before him, 2.68 miles of curves, straights, and memories. He took the first lap very slowly, recognizing each section. Curva do Sol, sun curve. Cena es descida do lago, lake descent. Subida dos boxes, pit lane rise. And there, in the middle of the circuit, the curve that had haunted his nightmares for 15 years. Curva Ferradura, horseshoe curve. That's where it all happened. That's where his car spun, crashed, and left him hospitalized for 8 months. Today it looked like just another curve. Just asphalt, curbs, runoff area. Nothing special, but Rob knew that when he passed through there at racing speed, it would be different. He did 2 more laps, gradually increasing speed, feeling the car, understanding the limits. The Nova was surprisingly agile in the technical curves. Where it lost on the straights, it gained in the corners. When he returned to the pits, he found a small crowd around his car. Other drivers, mechanics, curious onlookers, and in the middle of them was a man in his 60s, grey hair, glasses, wearing a polo shirt with the logo of a major racing team. "Robert Miller?" the man asked when Rob got out of the car. "Yes." The man extended his hand with a smile. "Frank Mascarenhas. I was a team principal when you were racing. I recognized your name on the entry list and came to see if it was really you." Rob shook his hand, surprised. "Mr. Mascarenhas, yes, it's me. After 15 years missing, you returned for an amateur race. May I ask why?" Rob looked at Mr. Jenkins, who gave an encouraging nod. "I need the prize money. My daughter is sick, and the treatment is expensive." Frank made an expression of understanding and sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that, but know that it's good to have you back on a track. You were one of the most talented drivers I've ever seen. I hope you haven't lost your touch." "I hope so too," Rob said with a nervous smile. The qualifying session started at noon. 20 cars were set to participate in the race. Robert hit the track with butterflies in his stomach. 1 fast lap. That was all that would determine his starting position. He floored it on the main straight. The Chevette's engine screamed, but the top speed was pathetic compared to the other cars. 87 miles per hour, while the tuned-up cars were pushing past 125. But in the corners it was different. Robert pushed the car to the absolute limit, using every inch of the track, braking as late as possible, accelerating as early as possible. The racer's instinct returned with every turn, as if it had never left. When he completed the lap, his time was good enough for 10th position. It wasn't great, but it wasn't shameful either, considering the car he was driving. Marcus Taylor qualified 3rd. His red Camaro was a beast, roaring down the track with brutal power. When he returned to the pits, he searched for Robert with his eyes and made a mocking gesture, running his finger across his neck as if cutting it. His friends, who had come to watch, laughed loudly. Robert ignored him. He focused on preparing the car for the race. Tony checked the tire pressure. Joe looked at the fluid levels. Old man Jim stood beside him like a real crew chief. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," Robert replied, and realized it was true. The race was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. 20 laps, 53 miles, everything that separated Robert from $10,000, and potentially $50,000 if he managed to beat Marcus. When the drivers were called to the starting grid, Robert put on his old helmet, the same one he had worn 15 years ago. It had a few scratches, and the paint was faded, but it still fit. He got into the Chevette and drove to his position in the 5th row. In pole position was a tuned-up BMW, blue and imposing. Beside it, a black Chevy Opala. In the 2nd row, Marcus's Camaro roared loudly, provocatively. Ahead of Robert were a red Golf GTI and a modified Civic. Anderson, the race organizer, approached Robert's car with a microphone. He was a man in his early 40s, a racing enthusiast who had been organizing these amateur events for 10 years. "Robert Allen, right?" he asked. "That's right." Anderson looked at him with renewed attention. "Are you the Robert Allen who was the stock car champion?" "I was. A long time ago." Anderson smiled and tapped the roof of the Chevette. "It's an honor to have a real champion in our race. Good luck out there." Frank Mascarenhas also appeared, walking the grid and stopping beside the Chevette. He was accompanied by 2 other men, clearly members of his team. It's going to be interesting to see you drive again, Rob. And look, regardless of the result today, stop by the pits afterward. I want to talk to you about an opportunity." Robert nodded, but he didn't have time to process what that meant. Officials were positioning the cars, preparing for the start. In the waiting area, his friends stood together. Old Man Jim, Tony and Joe were buzzing, cheering, believing. And somewhere in Sao Paulo at Santa Cruz Hospital, Ana Clara was watching the live stream that one of Robert's friends had set up on her tablet. The red flag was displayed. All the engines fired up at once, creating a symphony of power. The Chevette's engine was the quietest of them all, but also the most honest. Robert looked at the traffic light ahead. 5 red lights. They would soon go out. The race would soon begin. His heart pounded. His hands were firm on the steering wheel. There was no more fear. There was only focus, only determination, only the absolute need to win. The lights came on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all red, and then 3, 4, they went out. The roar of the 20 engines exploded simultaneously. Robert slammed the accelerator, but the Chevette responded too slowly. The BMW and the Opala shot ahead. Marcus's Camaro passed him as if he were standing still, the V8 engine singing a song of pure power. By the first corner, Robert had already lost 3 positions. He was in 13th. But he knew this would be the hard part. On the straights, he would be massacred. He had to make up for it in the corners. And that's what he did. At the S-curve, he dove inside the Civic, hitting the apex while the other car took the turn wide. He gained a position. On the lake descent, he braked later than an old VW Gol, passing on the inside and coming out ahead. Another position. Lap after lap, Robert drove at the absolute limit of what the Chevette and he himself were capable of. Every corner was a battle. Every overtake was a small but important victory. By the end of the 5th lap, he was in 8th place. Up front, Marcus's Camaro had taken the lead. The car was simply much more powerful than all the others. On the straights, he pulled away. He was almost a full lap ahead of Robert. On the 7th lap, Robert passed 2 more cars in a single daring maneuver at the horseshoe, the corner that haunted his nightmares. He entered it at high speed, the Chevette leaning dangerously, the tires screaming, and came out ahead of a Corsa and an Escort. 5th place. The pits were buzzing. Old Man Jim, Tony and Joe were shouting with joy. Frank Mascarenhas watched intently, impressed. That man in the old Chevette was driving like a professional, like a champion. But on the 10th lap, when Robert was consolidated in 4th place and starting to dream of the impossible, disaster struck. The engine temperature began to rise. The gauge that Tony had installed showed red numbers: 185 degrees, 195, 203. The engine was overheating, and then came the smoke, white, thick, pouring out from under the hood. The power dropped. The car, which was already slow, became even slower. Robert saw the cars approaching fast in his rear-view mirror. No, he whispered to himself. Not now. Not when he was so close. But he had no choice. Either he continued and completely destroyed the engine, or he slowed down and tried to preserve what was still working. He chose the second option, hoping it was just temporary overheating. The cars passed him one by one: 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. And then, on the pit straight, Marcus Taylor caught up to him as a backmarker. The Camaro zoomed past, honking, and Robert saw Marcus laughing inside the car, making mocking gestures. Robert gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at the gauge. 208 degrees. Dangerous, but not fatal. He still had an engine. He still had a car. He still had a chance. 8 laps to go. Robert was driving in 10th place, white smoke still pouring from the Chevette's hood, the engine losing power with every second. The temperature gauge dangerously fluctuated between 203 and 212 degrees. The oil pressure began to drop. The car was dying. 8 laps to go. 53 miles divided by 20 laps was about 2.65 miles per lap. 8 times 2.65 was just over 21 miles. 21 miles separating Robert from salvation or complete defeat. He had 2 choices. He could give up, pull off the track, save the engine, accept defeat and Marcus's public humiliation, or he could risk everything, floor it, and pray the engine would hold out until the end. He thought of Anna Clara, her thin face, her brave smile, the words she said, "You stop, you breathe, and you keep going." Robert took a deep breath and stomped on the accelerator. The engine groaned, protested, but responded. The temperature climbed to 215 degrees. The smoke grew thicker, but the car accelerated. In that moment, something changed inside him. The fear that had paralyzed him for 15 years simply vanished. There was no more room for fear. There was only the race, the track, the car, and the absolute need to win. The racer's instinct, dormant for so long, fully awakened. In the next corner, Robert dove inside a tuned-up Gaul with an aggression that surprised even himself. The two cars went wheel to wheel, but Robert maintained the perfect line and came out ahead. 9th place. On the pit straight, even losing top speed, he used the draft of the escort ahead of him, tucked in close, waited for the exact moment, and overtook on the side. 8th place. The pits went wild. Old Man Jim, Tony, and Joe were screaming, jumping, unable to believe what they were seeing. The smoking Chevette was coming back, gaining positions, defying physics and logic. Robert entered the horseshoe, the curve of his nightmares, at full speed. The car slid sideways, perfectly controlled, and he exited accelerating. There were no more ghosts there, just asphalt, just racing. On the 13th lap, he overtook the Civic that was in 7th. The Civic driver tried to defend his position, but Robert was simply better. Much better. 15 years away from the tracks hadn't taken away his skill, they had only preserved it like aging wine. 6th place, 5th, 4th. Then the accident happened that would change everything. On the 15th lap, on the climb to the pits, the 2nd and 3rd place cars, an Opala and a BMW, were fighting for position. They touched wheels in the corner, lost control, and spun out into the runoff area. Neither driver was hurt, but both were out of the race. Robert passed the two stopped cars, and suddenly he was in 2nd place. Ahead of him, only the red Golf GTI that had started in 4th. And much further ahead, almost a full lap in front, Marcus Taylor's Camaro led comfortably. 5 laps to go. The Chevette's engine was at its limit. 221 degrees. Oil pressure almost zeroed out. The smoke was so thick that the cars behind could barely see, but the engine was still running. It still had power. It still had life. Robert drove in a trance. Every corner was perfect. Every brake at the exact limit. Every acceleration at the right moment. He and the car were one dancing. On the track, with a synchronicity that only 15 years of experience and 30 years of tinkering with engines could create. On the 17th lap, something unexpected happened. Marcus's Camaro, which was leading by a wide margin, was on the main straight when it began to release white smoke from the exhaust. Different smoke, thicker, darker. Marcus had pushed the engine too hard. Even with all the advantage, even without needing to, he had accelerated at maximum speed the entire time, wanting not just to win but to humiliate. And the engine couldn't take it. Robert saw everything in the rearview mirror as he completed the lap. The red Camaro losing power, pulling off to the side of the track, stopping completely in the runoff area. Marcus pounded the steering wheel in anger, shouting words Robert couldn't hear but could imagine. The impossible had happened. Robert was in 1st place, but he couldn't celebrate yet. The red Golf was right behind, just 3 seconds away, and the Chevette was literally dying. 226 degrees, oil pressure in the critical red zone. The smoke was now dark grey, indicating that oil was burning inside the engine. 2 laps. It just needed 2 more laps. The Golf began to close in. The driver, a young man perhaps 30 years old, saw the opportunity of a lifetime. Overtake on the final lap and win the race. He pushed the car to the limit, gaining tenths of a second with every corner. Robert looked at the gauges. There was nothing left to extract from the Chevette. The car was giving everything it had, and then some. It was a question of who would arrive first, him at the finish line or the engine at complete destruction. Penultimate lap, the Golf was 2 seconds away. Robert could see it in the rearview mirror, growing, menacing. On the straights, the Golf was faster. In the corners, Robert still had a slight edge. Horseshoe. Robert dove deep, the Chevette groaning, the tires at the limit of adhesion. He exited perfectly. The Golf tried the same thing but lost the rear slightly, having to correct. I gained half a second, Robert thought. Last lap. The Golf was 1.5 seconds away, 21 corners, 2.65 miles. Everything that separated Robert from $10,000 and the chance to save his daughter. The engine was making terrible noises now, metallic, frightening, as if it would explode at any moment. The temperature had passed 230 degrees. Impossible. The engine should have seized 3 laps ago. But it kept running. Sun curve. Golf still glued to him. Senna S-Golf on the outside, trying to overtake. Robert defended the position on the inside. Lake descent. The two side by side. Horseshoe. Robert on the apex. Golf on the outside. The Chevette was ahead by half a car length. Climbed to the pits, final straight, 500 yards to the finish line. The Golf had more power. It began to pull alongside. 100 yards from the end, they were side by side, wheel to wheel. Robert pressed the accelerator to the floor, knowing it was the last thing he could do. The Chevette's engine gave one final gasp of life. 50 yards, still side by side. 20 yards. Impossible to tell who was ahead. 10 yards. Robert leaned his body forward as if it could help. 5 yards. The finish line. The two cars crossed together, so close it was impossible to tell with the naked eye who had won. And at the exact moment, the Chevette crossed the line. The engine emitted a horrible noise, a metallic scream of agony, and died completely. Robert continued by inertia, slowly pulling off to the side of the track, the car finally stopping. He took off his helmet with trembling hands, not from fear, but from emotional exhaustion. He had given everything, absolutely everything. But had it been enough? The answer came over the track radio. First position, car number 47, Robert Allen, with a final time difference of, the announcer made a dramatic pause, 47 thousandths of a second, 0.047 seconds, less than a blink of an eye. But enough. Enough for the victory. Robert got out of the car in tears. Tears he hadn't shed in 15 years. Tears of relief, of joy, of redemption. Old Man Jim, Tony and Joe ran to him, jumping, shouting, hugging. The old mechanic was crying too, proud of the man who had become his employee and friend. "You did it!" Tony shouted. "You did it, man!" Frank Mascarenhas also approached, a huge smile on his face. "That was the most incredible driving I've seen in years. Rob, you are special, very special." But Robert barely heard him. He looked up at the blue sky of São Paulo and thought of Ana Clara. He thought of showing her the trophy, of telling the story, of seeing her face light up with pride. The awards ceremony was quick. Robert climbed the podium, received the trophy and the symbolic check for $10,000. The small but enthusiastic crowd applauded. The anthem played. It was a moment Robert never thought he would live again. When he stepped down from the podium, he searched for Marcus with his eyes. He found him leaning against the broken Camaro, arms crossed, a dark expression. Robert walked up to him, the trophy still in his hand. $50,000. You promised in front of witnesses? Marcus gave a short, bitter laugh. Promised? That was a joke, mechanic. Did you really think I was going to pay you 50 grand for a crazy bet? The anger returned to Robert, but controlled now. He looked around and saw that they had attracted attention. Other drivers, organizers, the public, and more importantly, Frank Mascarenhas. Old Man Jim, Tony, and Joe approached. "We heard the bet," Old Man Jim said firmly. "You said it clearly. 50,000 if he beat you. We are witnesses." Marcus looked at the three men with disdain. "And who is going to believe three neighborhood garage mechanics? I'm not paying anything. It was a joke. End of story." At that moment, Frank Mascarenhas stepped forward. "I also heard the bet, Marcus." Everyone turned to him. Frank continued, his voice calm but firm. "I was at the garage on Thursday morning. I went there because I wanted to see Robert's car up close. I heard you make the bet. I heard him accept, and I heard you confirm it in front of witnesses." Marcus paled. Mr. Mascarenhas, I didn't know you were there. Well, you should pay more attention to your surroundings, Frank said. And now I'm going to tell you something. You are going to pay what you promised, because if you don't pay, I will personally tell your father, Congressman Taylor, that his son made a public bet and didn't honor his word. The blood drained from Marcus's face. His father was an influential conservative politician who valued honor and word above all else. If he knew his son had broken his word in a public bet, the consequence would be terrible. Furthermore, Frank continued, I will publicize this in all racing circles in São Paulo. You will never be respected on a track again. Your name will be synonymous with dishonor. A heavy silence settled. Marcus looked from Frank to Robert, then to the witnesses. He was cornered. Completely cornered. Fine, he said finally, his voice low. I'll pay. Monday dawned rainy in São Paulo. Robert arrived at the garage earlier than usual, the race trophy carefully stored in his backpack. The victory still felt like a dream. The $10,000 from the official prize were already deposited in his account, but the $50,000 promised by Marcus was still an unknown. Frank Mascarenhas had guaranteed that Marcus would pay, but Robert had learned not to count on the promises of rich, arrogant men. He would be at peace with the $10,000. It was already more than he had before. It was hope. At 9 in the morning, when Old Man Jim opened the garage gate, a black Mercedes-Benz parked in front. Marcus Taylor got out of the car, with a black briefcase in his hand. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept. The arrogance had been replaced by something akin to bitter resignation. I came to pay what I owe, he said without greeting anyone. Robert, Tony, and Joe gathered as Marcus opened the briefcase on the hood of a car. Inside, perfectly organized in stacks, were 100 Rees bills. A lot of money. More money than Robert had seen together in his entire life. $50,000, Marcus said, his voice monotonous. Check it if you want. Robert counted. It took 10 minutes, but it was all there. Exactly $50,000. He closed the briefcase and looked Marcus in the eyes for the first time that morning. You won't need all of it, Marcus asked with a touch of sarcasm. I thought your daughter needed $40,000. Robert took $10,000 from the briefcase and separated it. He put the rest back and closed the briefcase again. Then he pushed the briefcase back toward Marcus. What are you doing? Marcus asked, confused. Robert took the $10,000 he had separated and handed it to Marcus as well. You are going to do one thing for me. 3 things, actually. Marcus looked at the money without understanding. First thing, Robert continued, his voice firm and calm. You're going to donate this $10,000 to the pediatric oncology ward at Santa Cruz Hospital, anonymously, without your name, without publicity, without anything. Just a donation. Marcus was about to protest, but Robert raised his hand. Second thing, you are going to make monthly donations of $2,500 to that same ward for the next 2 years. If you miss a single month, I will personally tell your father and Frank Mascarenhas. This is extortion, Marcus muttered. No, Robert said calmly. This is penance. It's you doing something good in the world instead of just doing harm. It's you helping other children like my daughter. And the third thing? Robert took a step forward, getting very close to Marcus. You never come back to this garage. You never speak to me or my daughter again. You never try to humiliate me or humiliate anyone who works honestly. You are banned from here forever. Marcus held the money and the briefcase with the remaining $40,000. For a moment it seemed like he was going to argue, but then he just nodded, got into the Mercedes and drove away. They never saw him again. Old Man Jim put his hand on Robert's shoulder. You're a better man than me, Rob. I would have kept it all. Robert smiled. I have enough. $40,000 is more than I need, and those other kids at the hospital need help too. With the money in hand, Robert rushed to Santa Cruz Hospital. He found the doctor responsible for Ana Clara's treatment, Dr. Mendez, a man in his 40s with glasses and a gentle smile. Doctor, I have the money. Can we start the new treatment? Dr. Mendez looked at Ana Clara's documents and nodded. Yes, with this treatment, her chances improve significantly. We will start this week. Robert entered Ana Clara's room with tears in his eyes. She was sitting on the bed, watching cartoons on the tablet. "Dad, how was it? Did you win?" "I won, my daughter. I really won." She jumped off the bed, or rather tried to jump, but was too weak. Robert held her and hugged her tightly, feeling the fragility of her body, but also the strength of her spirit. "And there's more," he said. "We are going to start the new treatment, the one that has the best chance of curing you." Anna Clara started to cry, and Robert did too. There in that hospital room, father and daughter cried together, not from sadness, but from renewed hope. 3 months passed. The new treatment was working. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The tests showed significant improvement. Anna Clara was stronger, her hair starting to grow back, the smile returning to her face. Robert had accepted Frank Mascarenhas's proposal. He worked part-time as a technical consultant for the racing team, helping to prepare cars and give driving tips to young drivers. The salary was 3 times what he earned as a mechanic. He continued working at St. George's Garage in the afternoons because he didn't want to abandon Old Man Jim and the friends he had made there. It was a sunny Saturday when Robert arrived at the garage and found Old Man Jim, Tony and Joe with mysterious smiles on their faces. "What's going on?" "Come see," Tony said, pointing to the back of the garage. Covered by a new tarp was a car. Robert pulled back the tarp and saw a 1989 Chevy Chevette, white with red accents, completely restored. The engine was impeccable. The paint shone like new. The interior was clean and refreshed. "What is this?" "Your gift," Old Man Jim said. "We used the parts from your old Chevette that were still good and pooled money to buy the others. It's yours." Robert was speechless. He ran his hand over the perfect hood, feeling emotion tighten his throat. "You guys didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did," Joe said. "You deserve it." Robert hugged the 3 friends, too emotional to speak. That afternoon, he went to pick up Anna Clara at the hospital. She had been temporarily discharged to spend the weekend at home. She was thinner than she should be, but her eyes sparkled with life. "Dad, is this car new?" "It is and it isn't. Come on, I'll take you for a ride." They drove through the city, the windows open, the wind blowing through Anna Clara's hair that was starting to grow. Robert told stories of his old races, of when he was young and dreamed of being a champion. Anna Clara laughed, asked for details, wanted to know everything. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Would you go back to professional racing if you had the chance?" Robert thought. For a moment. "I don't know. Maybe. But only if you were there to see me." Anna Clara held her father's hand. "Then one day I will be. When I get better, we'll go to a track together. You race and I'll watch. Promise?" "I promise." They stopped at an overlook that offered a view of the city. São Paulo stretched out before them, immense and chaotic, but also full of possibilities. Robert looked at his daughter beside him and felt a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He had lost a lot in life: his career, his marriage, 15 years of fear and trauma. But he had also gained. He had gained Anna Clara. He had gained his self-respect back. He had gained the ability to face his demons. "You know what I realized," Robert said. "What?" "That courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. You taught me that." Anna Clara smiled. "You taught me too. We taught each other." Robert started the Chevette's engine, and they began to descend the hill. They didn't know what the future would bring. Whether Anna Clara would be completely cured, whether Robert would return to professional racing, whether life would be easy or difficult from then on. But they knew one thing. They knew that as long as they were together, as long as they had each other, they could face any curve, any obstacle, any challenge that life put in their way. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about money or trophies. It was about love, about family, about never giving up on the people we love. And as the Chevette drove down the city with father and daughter inside, the São Paulo sun shone brightly, illuminating the road ahead. A road that still had many turns, but which they would travel together, always together, no matter what happened. Because just as Robert had driven that old Chevette beyond all possible limits, just as he had won against all odds, He would also drive through life with Anna Clara by his side, at the limit, without fear, always forward. And that curve that haunted his nightmares for 15 years. Now it was just another curve in the road, just a place where he had fallen, but also where he had learned to get back up. End of story. If Robert and Anna Clara's journey touched your heart, you are not alone. Stories of overcoming adversity, of fathers who would do anything for their children, of second chances, and of courage in the face of fear remind us of the best in humanity. Here we create narratives that move, inspire, and stay with you long after you finish reading. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments what moment moved you the most. Your participation motivates us to continue bringing stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and the power of unconditional love. Thank you so much for joining us on this thrilling race.